and be completely normal.
Okay.
I'll let y'all know when. Okay, we are currently live. Or
All
wait,
right. Hello, thank you for tuning in to Champaign Public Library's free comic book day event. We are here to interview Jeremy Whitley. I am Kat Purcell. I work here at the Champaign Public Library in Adult Services. If you've never done a Zoom or a live interview before, we do have a chat box on YouTube, and you're more than welcome to type in any questions. Keep in mind, we are being recorded, and we will relay those on to Jeremy and when you've got those questions. So a little bit about Jeremy, if you're not familiar with him, he is a writer of this year's featured free comic book day title, School for Extra-terrestrial Girls. He's also previously written for titles like My Little Pony, Princeless, Thor versus Hulk, and he is tuning in with us today from North Carolina. So thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you for having me.
So right before we go into the deep stuff, can you just tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into comics?
Yeah, so I have always wanted to get into writing. I went to school for writing at University of North Carolina. And I grew up really into superheroes and really into comics. And it really didn't dawn on me until after I graduated college that there was somebody that was doing just the writing for comics, that you didn't have to be able to draw, which I can't. My drawing is awful. And I figured out that, you could just do the writing part. And work with an artist. So I, ended up getting together with a couple of friends that I met online who also wanted to work on comics and just wanted to do the drawing part. And, we made a few of our own, create our own comics. And we sort of, published our own things and went to a couple of, conventions all sort of on our own. And it wasn't until Princeless that I had something that got picked up by a publisher, Action Lab in this case, where it was actually getting published through stores. People could find it places that weren't just me at a table. And I started doing that regularly. And then I was lucky enough to have some people read that liked my work, that hired me for jobs doing things like My Little Pony, and eventually Marvel stuff like Thor versus Hulk and Unstoppable Wasp and things like that. And it's only really been, the last couple of years that I've been writing full time.
That's awesome. Congratulations. So speaking of which, for School for Extra-terrestrial Girls, one of the titles available here at the Champaign Public Library and comic book stores across the country. Can you tell me a little bit about this title for someone who's never picked up a comic in their life?
Yeah, so it's written by myself and drawn by my friend Jamie Noguchi. And it is about a young girl named Tara who has always wanted to be special, has always thought there was something different about herself. And one day, through a series of accidents and coincidences, bursts into flames in the middle of class. She spontaneously combusts. And she learns that there is, in fact, something different about her, and that it's that she's been lied to her whole life by her parents, and she's actually an alien. So she has the option of either getting shipped off to some other planet somewhere that she's never been to be with her people, or of going to the School for Extra-terrestrial Girls, the job of which is to take these young girls who either didn't know they were aliens or are new to the planet, and put them through a series of education, both about their place in the universe, but also how to use whatever powers they have, how to be a good alien in the universe, more or less.
Sounds like some intense and good themes there. So speaking of Tara, we know that she starts off in kind of like a strict routine. Do you have a strict routine that you keep to yourself?
No, I wish I could say that I do, but I'm not that intense of a parent. I do have two kids of my own, and I'm not the best about keeping routines. I do try to get them up and moving and doing stuff in the mornings, and to bed at a reasonable time. But I can't keep a routine to save my life, and they're not any better. I mean, they're 5 and 10, so they do whatever they want.
Yeah. I don't know any 5-year-olds that are good at a routine. So one of the themes of School for Extra-terrestrial Girls is kind of stories about these group of girls who are kind of outcasts in their own little way. Why was that something in particular you wanted to write about?
I think, the combination of doing this story in high school is interesting to me because I feel like everybody in their own way feels kind of like an alien in high school. Like they feel like they don't quite fit in, like everybody else has it figured out and they don't know what's going on with their life. So, making that sort of a literal thing that everybody's actually finding out in this group that they're aliens or having to deal with being aliens at, this age, I think was an interesting idea for me, of, having lived, 16 years as a human and then discovering that, you're not who or what you thought at all. And you've got to deal with all these big life changes. Because I feel like when you're in high school, everything feels like it's life or death. And I feel like the best YA stuff kind of makes that literal.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's funny you say that. I actually used to feel like it was a big secret myself that I felt like I was an alien when I was in high school. And now like that's just like, oh, we all just felt like we were the weirdo and we were all the weirdos.
Yeah, I think that's, something everybody goes through in their own way in high school is they all feel like I'm the strange one and everybody else has got it figured out and everybody else is normal. Well, meanwhile, not only are all the other kids at your high school feeling that way, but a lot of the teachers who are, 20 something, 30 something, 40 something are also feeling that way about their lives.
Right. Yeah, that's an excellent point. I definitely still have those moments myself as an adult. So you also talked about how Tara figured out her power like in the middle of school bursting into flames. And I think we've all had that time where we were embarrassed in front of our friends. How do you handle that? Or do you have any advice for teenagers who felt really embarrassed in front of their friends?
I think the biggest thing to remember is that it's never as big a deal to everybody else as it feels like to you. Like you said, everybody has those moments themselves. And everybody feels like that's the moment that everything is from this moment on, everything is going to go wrong for me. But the reality is, I mean, all of us have had those moments and most of us have survived them and continue to deal with life. And the biggest thing, the biggest place for those things is in your own mind. Other people move on and forget about it and they have their own things. So I think that the best thing you can do is just like accept that it happened, and deal with it the best you can and keep moving forward and being yourself, because there's no way to avoid those kinds of catastrophes. Something, especially as a teenager, you don't have control over everything in your life. Something bad is bound to happen at some point, especially when you put as many people as in a high school together in the same place.
Yeah, I definitely think that that's good advice there. When I was in high school, one of my most embarrassing moments was like I was in class and I was chewing gum, which I wasn't supposed to have, and it literally fell out of my mouth onto my paper for my homework that day. And the teacher saw it as it happened and he just like chuckled, which was even worse. I was like, oh no. And just was like absolutely red in the face the whole rest of class. I'm sure of it. And afterwards, I had to hand it in and was just terrible mess about it. And he was like, look, we're just going to cut this corner off. 5 years from now, no one is even going to think about this moment. And obviously I'm here 15 years later, still thinking about this moment. But that piece of advice he gave me has helped me through those embarrassing, awkward moments so many times. So I think you're absolutely right on that point. It's worse in your own mind than it is in real life.
Yeah, I mean, I played football through most of middle school and high school, and when you put a bunch of people in pads and have them run at each other, something bad is bound to happen occasionally. And between playing the sport and being in workouts during the summer and weightlifting class, there's always embarrassing things that happen. I very distinctly remember getting pegged in the head with a medicine ball when I was in exercising, and like I was stunned, and everybody thought it was hilarious. And it was literally like, medicine balls are heavy. It was like I don't know what's going on. And I was like, this is the worst day of my life. But uh, there's always going to be crazier things down the line somewhere else. I don't think any of the people that were in that room would remember it if I mentioned it to them today.
Right, right. So what would you do if you found out your parents had kidnapped you and were terrorists?
I don't know. I mean, I like to think that I would do, pull off some sort of action movie thing where I would just, either try to stop my terrorist parents and be some sort of hero. But I think I'm much more likely to do, especially at that age, I would have been much more likely to do what Tara does, which is cry.
Yeah, I feel like that would be a pretty traumatic moment.
Yeah. Go. I mean, Tara, I think, has a lot of understandable reactions where, her first reaction to most of the horrible things that happen to her is just to go hide in the bathroom and cry. But then, it's what you do after that that's important, I think. Everybody should be allowed to, when something bad happens to them, go hide in the bathroom and cry.
Right. Yeah, it's important to just kind of take a moment for sure. So what advice would you give to kids who feel out of place like Tara?
I would say that, everybody feels that way. It may not seem like it, but, everybody goes through some version of that. Everybody feels like they're the ones that stand out. They're the ones that don't belong there. But I think, as you get older, the things that stand out about you, the things that are strange and different, end up being the things that like make you who you are and make you a better person, make you an interesting person. Because I think, a lot of people, when you're 14 or 15, you just want to be like everybody else. But by the time you're 20, you're just like, I just want to do something different. I don't want to do what everybody else is doing. I want to figure out my own thing. So like, I know it's hard to say, lean into that stuff, but like embrace the stuff about you that's weird. I know, both of us were nerdy kids in high school, and now at this age, that's our jobs are being nerdy kids, and we get to, like, the best parts of both of what we do is we just get to hang out with other nerdy kids and do nerdy stuff.
Absolutely. I was definitely that kid hiding that I was reading comic books in high school. And now it's a dream that I'm getting to host Free Comic Book Day and talk to people like you about these awesome stories. So that's wonderful advice.
Yeah, I definitely don't think I could have told you that, at 16 that I'd be, writing comic books specifically aimed for like teenage girls, but between, Princeless and School for Extra-terrestrial Girls, that's very much what I've been doing.
That actually leads into one of my other questions. So why is it that you're this, older man writing such great stories for younger and teenage girls?
I think part of it is, I think comics about teenage heroes and teenage misfits and stuff always appealed to me, just because, I mean, obviously I was one of those, but I think that's a particularly interesting time to be one of those. It's less interesting to be a weirdo at 30, I think, than it is at 16. You're sort of figuring those things out, and that makes for a more interesting story in a lot of cases. And I think there's a lot of comics out there already about 30 something men. Most of them wear tights and run around and punch bad guys. But I like doing something that there's not a whole bunch of other stuff out there for. And my big inspiration to start writing teenage female characters was my own daughters, because I have two girls. At the time I started writing Princeless, I was getting ready to have my first daughter, and I was like, I want to write stuff that will speak to her, that can show her that she can be a hero, that she can do this stuff as well, because I felt like I didn't see much stuff out there that put young girls in that spotlight, especially not young girls of color, which my daughter is. And I wanted to be able to share my love of comics and nerdy stuff with her. And I felt like there was a lot of push just to focus on people like I am, 30 something white guys. And I wanted to be able to share comics with her, and for her to be able to see herself in those comics.
Well, I definitely, as a fan myself, I relate to the stories you tell. So thank you so much for bringing these stories into the world.
Thank you.
One of the things I have a question about with Extra-terrestrial Girls before we kind of move on to other things is that I noticed that there are some commonalities between the human forms that the Extra-terrestrial Girls take on to hide their powers, and then the powers or real forms that they have. Can you tell me a little about that process, and if you worked with your artist to convey those?
Yeah, Jamie and I talked a lot about what we wanted the girls to look like. We wanted to specifically have, I think it bothers both of us that a lot of times when there are comics that are about being different or feeling different, and a lot of the times about, a lot of times it has to do with people's races, that often in those comics you don't see different races of people actually represented in the comic. It's just the metaphor. There's not, different representations there as well. So we wanted to make sure that, in this sort of science fiction, that we included girls that looked different ways, and that we did something, interesting with the actual, physical appearances of them as humans as well. So I think specifically the biggest one for me was Summer, who, as you read the first book, she appears to be sort of big and fun and full of energy, and she's very pretty. She's very just excited to be there most of the time, and she's nice to everybody. But she has a physical form when she's an alien that's very intimidating and downright scary. She's she has this big sort of these huge tentacles. She's we call her sort of a, she has this sort of look like an elder god, like a Cthulhu or something like that, that does not look like somebody that would be fun to hang out with. But she is, once you get to know her and you see that appearance that she presents out there into the world, you learn that those looks are, as an alien, deceiving. That she actually is that person inside who is bright and bubbly and happy. And if you had just seen, this big pink tentacle monster, you probably wouldn't have gotten to know that.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I thought it was interesting too, the choice between some girls who prefer their alien form and some girls who prefer their human form. And I think appreciating both is a cool part of the story too. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that's sort of the truth of learning who you are, whether it's growing or finding new things that you like, or coming out, is that some people are nervous about showing who they really are, and some people are excited to just finally be this other person. Misako is a good example of that. Like, she's a kid who's been through a lot as a kid. She's had a rough childhood, and she's always wanted to have something that was special about her, and she didn't feel like there was anything. And she learns that not only is she not human, but she's also magical. She's sort of an extra dimensional fairy, and so like she's super excited about her form, whereas Tara is pretty nervous about hers. And Summer is a little hesitant to show people what she really looks like, because she is a nice person, and she is used to being in that form, but she also knows that it's frightening to other girls.
Cool. Yeah, that's a great insight into that. I think it's really important to just us as regular humans.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a crush and where you were worried that they wouldn't like you back?
Oh, absolutely. I think every crush I've ever had, I'm I'm terribly worried about that. You know, even now, I've been married for like 13 years, and I'm still like, oh, why does my wife like me? She's beautiful and wonderful, great. I get why people like her, but why does she like me?
Yeah, I definitely relate to that. I deal with that with myself, with my own partner. Just like, what? Do you really still like me? Or is this some trick that we've been playing on each other for 10 years?
Yeah, what are you up to? When's that other shoe gonna drop?
So, and into your writing and stuff as a whole. So when you write a comic, where do you usually start with your process?
I tend to start with usually with an idea. Every once in a while, it's a character. Every once in a while, there's sort of a character in my mind that I want to get down on paper. But usually, it's a concept that I'm like, I want to write a story, that's like this, but also this. I think I've had a few recently. I mean, Princeless was, I think, a prime example of like, I want to tell a story that the audience is for the story is going to be interested in because it's a princess, because it's pink and frilly and exciting, and it has the things that they're there for, but tells a story that they're going to be interested in, that might be different from what they've seen before, that um, teaches them the kind of lessons that I want my own daughter to learn about what it does and doesn't mean to be a princess. So I started sort of with that idea of princess but feminist, princess but warrior, princess but runaway, and that's, I think, where a lot of the things start. I mean, the Extra-terrestrial Girls thing started very much that way. It's like, I want to do a sci-fi story with teenagers, but with sort of this central idea of just figuring out who you are, this sort of life-changing revelation, right? And dealing with that and becoming this new version of you. And that was where I started with that. Every once in a while, it's just like, I want to tell like a combination of stories that I haven't seen. Like, I'm working on a comic right now that's sort of an Arthurian noir comic, and it's just like putting those two words together. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, who would that story be about? What would that be like? That's when I get interested in dropping in and doing more in a story, is when I come up with a concept and I'm like, oh, I want to know what that's about. Well, that means other people will want to know what that's about. So that's I think the place to follow it.
Cool. So when you have your story idea and then you start writing it out, how does that collaboration then work with the artist?
It's different with different artists. There are plenty of stories I've worked on, especially if it's like a work for hire thing like My Little Pony or Marvel or something like that, where I'm working with an editor and they are picking an artist, or they're finding somebody to pair me up with, where I don't necessarily communicate directly with them to start, or we get paired up and then we talk after that. But there are also cases of things like School for Extra-terrestrial Girls, where like I really liked Jamie. We had hung out some at conventions and stuff, and we wanted to work together on something. I was like, hey, I have this idea for this thing. It's not kind of fully developed, but I have sort of the beginning of it. Does this sound like something that would be interesting to you? And he jumped on it, was excited about that one. So we sort of talked back and forth about designs for the characters and what they should look like, and working out some of the finer points of the plot. And then I just went to town with writing it, and handed it off to him. We go back and forth on designs and characters, and I always try to stay like open to artists making the comic better. I think a lot of writers are really worried about making sure that the thing they had in mind ends up being the thing that's on the paper, and I don't think that's the best way to do it. I think a lot of times artists at the very least know what's going to look better on the page and can give you, very sound feedback on like, oh no, this should have one more panel than what you've written down, so that it reads more clearly, that we know what's going on. And it's important to listen to that stuff. And then, when people bring you ideas, when they tell you what they want to draw, to get excited about that and get that into the story. Because that's definitely what happened with the second book of School for Extra-terrestrial Girls. Is I was like, Jamie, what kind of stuff do you want to draw? Like, what can we get in here that'll be fun for you to do? And people will definitely see what that choice is when they read the second book, because there's some big surprises in the second half of that.
Cool. That's interesting insight. So what advice would you give any of our viewers watching who's interested in becoming a writer or an artist for comics?
My biggest advice with writing is to do it. Like, if you're sitting around planning and plotting and trying to get somebody to give you permission to write, it's not going to happen. Nobody is just going to show up at your house and give you a job, writing Spider-Man. The only way you get those kinds of jobs is to make your own thing. To go out there and come up with an original idea and work on it and show that you know what you're doing. And then you'll have something that's sort of a business card to take to people and say, look, I can do it. I can make this stuff. I think the same is true to some extent outside of comics as well, in that, like, people want to hear your voice. They want to hear what you have to say, but they don't know it's you that they want to hear. They can't track you down unless you have something to show them. So, you get started write short stories, write small things first that you can do and finish, and that you can show to groups of friends who can critique and give you advice and tell you how to get better, and then just keep doing it, because the job of writing is hard. It's daunting. You have to keep doing it even when you don't know what you're doing. That's the hardest thing about it, is unless you're writing specifically for a company, for a video game or something like that, people aren't necessarily going to tell you what to write next. And if you just stop writing, then you're not a writer anymore. you're not doing the job. So I think if you love it, if it's what you want to do, then you've got to do it without the necessary promise of making a ton of money at the beginning, and get better at it the same way that you would any other job, anything you go to school for.
Yeah, I think that's a great advice. When I was a kid, I used to want to be like a live musician. I used to think if I just like played guitar on my porch, one day someone would walk by and be like, "We're signing you for a record deal." And obviously I'm not a rock star to this day because it didn't work out that way. So I mean,
librarians are rock stars in their own right.
Thank you. Just not with the guitar.
I think like getting started is easier now than it's ever been. That impediment of actually writing something is the hardest part, but it's easier to get it out there. You can have a web comic, you can have a blog, you can have it's very easy to put things out there somewhere where they can be discovered, where you can share them, much easier than it used to be, even when I started doing comics, and 12 years ago, when they didn't have as many platforms for people to share their webcomics and get new stuff out there. And there's plenty of people out there that read comics that have never picked up a physical comic book in their life. They just, love webcomics. They read all their stuff there.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. There's some really good webcomics out there. And real quick, I wanted to make sure viewers know that they can feel free to ask us questions too. It doesn't have to just be my questions. We will relay those on to Jeremy if you have those questions. So through your multiple titles, there's a lot between My Little Pony and Princeless, and also Extra-terrestrial Girls, of course, and even Thor versus Hulk and Unstoppable of groups of friends throughout your work. Why is that something that is important for you to write about in your stories?
I think it's important for a variety of different reasons. I mean, I think that it's important to have different types of characters in your stories. I like to have groups of friends because it gives me an opportunity to write about more than just one type of person and get like fun interaction and people talking and the way that groups of people and friends interact. But also I think there's this sort of unfortunate thing with superheroes in comics where there's this image that to do the right thing and to be a good person, you have to be this weird, lonely, guy standing on rooftops. And I don't think that's the case. I think it's possible to do a lot of, amazing and heroic things with a community, with a group of friends, and to care about people individually without sacrificing that caring about justice and the world as a whole. I think it's a not necessarily a good thing that we've put that out there, that to do the right thing you have to do it alone. You have to be a strange loner, because I think even in comic books, when we say that all day long, it doesn't hold true. I mean, Batman is obviously the most famous loner who does stuff alone and goes off alone in the dark to do things, but he has just this like huge family of characters around him that he just keeps recruiting and keeps bringing home. He's
Right. There's how
had a
many
half dozen
Robins are we at
Robins.
now?
Yeah, did a half dozen Robins, two Batgirls, like I guess three Batgirls, and a butler, friends, girlfriends, various villains who have become friends with him over the years. It's just, Batman's got a huge community around him. He just decides to be broody about it.
I think that's a really good point, and a good thing to expand on, especially as we're going through all of this in COVID right now, where it feels so lonely and shut off while we're staying at home. And we're just starting to get out in various stages of community-ness again. And yeah, all along being part of a community is going to be what gets us through it. So yeah, I think that's really insightful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
When you so you write for a variety of audiences, from little kids with My Little Pony, but you've also done titles like Vampirella. So is your process for writing different based on the audience or the title? I can't imagine writing between those two different stories.
The process itself is not hugely different. I think it's a different headspace when you're writing, because I mean, obviously the restrictions are a little different. I very distinctly remember a point where I was trying to hit deadlines on both Vampirella and My Little Pony, and attempting to finish writing Vampirella and then switch over to My Little Pony just didn't work for my brain. So I was like, oh well, Twilight Sparkle has a horn. Does she ever gore people? Like that doesn't seem right. I think it's difficult to make sure you're in the right mind space for that. Sometimes you gotta, put the computer down for a little bit and go reset. But I think other than making sure that in stuff that's aimed for a younger audience, generally there's less blood, less cussing. It's a very similar process. I think the hardest thing has been like in the first issue of Princeless, I gave Adrian a sword, and then I realized that like she couldn't stab anybody. That's not a really like great thing to do in a middle grades book, is for her to just go around stabbing people.
Yeah.
So the fights tend to be a little more creative in the way that they wrap up in Princeless. People rarely just get stabbed and then die at the end of those stories. But I think that's the interesting thing, is sometimes writing for younger audiences makes you have to be more creative in how you tell a story.
Is there any kind of other creative outlets that you look to kind of help guide you and get inspiration when you're switching between those kinds of genres?
Um, hmm. I think I tend to watch a lot of movies and play a lot of games, and also significant amount of TV. My Little Pony, it's pretty easy to get into the headspace because there are several hundred episodes of the TV show that you can just jump in there and watch and be like, okay, that's right, that's what this is about. But I think sometimes the best thing to do to sort of reset your brain is to go do something that isn't directly connected to your creativity, to go work out or go for a walk, or just, and in some cases go for a drive. Just get out of your head for a while, and allow yourself to sort of reset and think about what it is you're trying to do, and then I think it's easier to go back in fresh.
Oh, that makes sense. That's cool. So you've done quite a few creator-owned projects, and then you also, as mentioned, you've written for Marvel too. Is it very different writing for yourself versus somebody else? Is the process publishing those kinds of different?
It definitely is. It depends a little bit on in stuff that's work for hire, so things that I'm hired to do that aren't my original idea. It depends a little bit on the property, because Marvel, believe it or not, is a little easier a lot of the time than, say, a My Little Pony, because the people that are editing my comic have the ultimate yes or no power over things. They work for Marvel, so what Marvel says goes. Whereas with My Little Pony, I am working with IDW, who is working with this property that's owned by Hasbro. So ultimately, it's a kind of a telephone thing. Hasbro has to approve everything that we do. So sometimes, my editor will love an idea, will be so excited about doing it, and we'll send the idea to Hasbro, and Hasbro will be like, oh, no, that's a lot like something we're going to do in the TV show, so let's not do that. Or, oh, that contradicts something else we're going to do in the TV show. So it's a bit of a sort of literally like a minefield where you don't really know where to step, because you might accidentally you might come up with the absolute best idea, and then they're like, oh no, we're planning a movie down the line 6 months from now where this character is going to do this, so this won't make sense. It's like, oh, all right, I guess that's fine. Marvel has some of that as well, because there are 50 or 100 books coming out a month of Marvel stuff. So every once in a while, it's like, especially if you want to use a character from a different book. I very distinctly remember when I was writing Future Foundation for Marvel, I was like, all right, and I want to have Rocket Raccoon guest starring in this issue, doing this, and that. And they're like, oh, actually, Rocket's going to be dead that month, so that won't work.
Oh no.
And he was back 6 months later, but at the time that I wanted to use him, he wasn't around. So I had to find other people to fill that spot.
Oh, that's frustrating. Ugh, a bit of a dream crusher.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been fun with Rocket in there, but I ended up getting to use Yondu, and Yondu's fun too. So
that's cool. That's good. So if you had your own superpower, what would it be?
I've thought a lot about this one, and it's teleportation, because there's nothing that I hate more than the time it takes to get from here to a convention. I don't like flying. I don't like the 9 hours of driving, the 10 hours of being in a train that it takes to get to New York. Yeah, I'd love to just be able to disappear where I'm at and appear somewhere else. That's ideal for me, even if it's not my own personal superpower, even if it's just like Star Trek setup where I gotta go walk into a pod and then I'll pop up at the other side. That's what I really want. and none of this. I'm tired of this walking stuff.
It is work. Yeah. Or even
Yeah.
just sitting in traffic seems like a whole different level of work than anything else. Because what else can you do? Oh, I totally understand.
Yeah, I do a lot of conventions up around the DC area, and it's always a real guessing game because at some point you might just end up in a hour and a half traffic jam because somebody's doing construction in some stretch of Virginia.
Oh, yeah. Teleportation for sure.
Yeah.
So, do you have one specific superhero or other relative hero that you would just it would be a dream for you to write?
That's a tough one. There's a lot of characters I like. I enjoy the sort of hard part of somebody going, well, we want to do something with this character. What would you do with that character? And just sort of like figuring out, all right, what's the story I'd want to tell with that person. I think I would love to do some X-Men related stuff. I'm a huge fan of Storm and Gambit and Rogue, and I grew up with all those sort of characters in the 90s. So I'd love to do some X-Men stuff. I'd really love to do something with Wonder Woman, or I think really what I love is a lot of the like second tier DC characters. Like I'd really love to do something with Cassandra Cain, who was Batgirl for a long time.
Yeah.
And I just there's a lot of I always like those characters that I feel like have gotten short shrift, that haven't had a chance to have as many big adventures as say Batman. I feel like there's very little chance that if I decided that if I were to get hired to write Batman, that I'd write the best Batman story. Yeah, because there's thousands of those. But if I got a chance to write Cassandra Cain or one of these characters, I might write like the best version of them. I might write the biggest exciting version of them. Like I loved writing the Wasp, both Nadia and Janet, because Nadia is new. There's so much to figure out about her. And then Janet has been around for so long, but has very rarely had the spotlight. And I think she's a fascinating character who, I've talked about a lot, is the sort of only grown up on the original Avengers.
Yeah.
Between Hulk, Thor, Iron Man, and Hank Pym, everybody else is just sort of a kid doing whatever they want to, and she's the only one that has like a job and is actually responsible. So I like that idea of giving a shot to a character who maybe hasn't had as many chances to be in the spotlight.
Awesome. Yeah, I can totally see that, and it comes through a lot, or at least in Unstoppable Wasp, it does. Yeah. So, what is maybe your favorite thing about being a writer in this career?
There's a lot of things I like about being a writer. I think my favorite thing about writing comic books specifically is I get to come up with things and then watch them come to life, watch them, be drawn and become a real thing and go out there in the world. I've gotten to work with some incredible illustrators, both on my own original stuff and at Marvel, and to like turn in a script that says, a thing happens that introduces a new character. And see that character actually come to life and become a real thing is amazing. It's really cool. And it's something only really like screenwriters and playwrights get. But I get it. It's such a like much faster speed than they do, because in a lot of cases it's like especially when I'm writing for My Little Pony or Marvel, it's like I write a thing and then 3 months later it's real. Other people are seeing it.
Yeah, I can imagine what that would feel like. That's pretty cool. So then what would you say is the hardest part about being a writer?
The hardest part is, I think, not getting discouraged, right? Because even when you're successful, even when you're writing a lot and you have a lot of things coming out, there's also a lot of of not making it, of not being able to do the thing you wanted to do, of I think at any given point, I've got 100 different projects that I'm like thinking about that I want to do, characters I'd love to work with, companies I'd want to work with. And the reality is most of those things aren't ever going to happen. Um, there's a lot of people telling you no. There's a lot of, ideas that you think are great and other people just can't see. They can't see what you see in them. There's a lot of rejection. And I think that's the hardest part, is knowing that like you're certain that you're onto something, and that for whatever reason it isn't catching on with an editor or an audience even, and feeling like you can't quite make the thing that you wanted to make, whether it's from the start or whether it just doesn't quite turn out right. I think that's the most difficult thing, is there's never enough time to write everything you want to write, and you're never going to be able to get it all out there.
Yeah. So I couldn't go without asking this one question as someone who works in a library. Who is your favorite author, or what is your favorite book?
Oh, that's a tough question.
That's why I ask author, because I couldn't pick a favorite book.
Yeah, I feel like it changes all the time. I feel like I read new things, and they're I latch onto the newest thing I read, and I get excited about checking out something different. I think as far as like comic book writers, I think the person whose stuff I most consistently love is Brian K. Vaughan. I was a big fan of Why the Last Man, and when that was coming out, it's getting ready to be a TV show. I love Saga. I loved his run on Runaways.
Yeah.
He's done a lot of great stuff, and I very rarely does it not click with me. So yeah, like he's definitely up there. I also love Matt Fraction and Kelly Sue DeConnick. I've been lucky enough to get to be friends with. But there's a ton of great authors out there, and I'm always very excited by like things that I'm reading that really latch on for me. Like I'm doing my best to read actual books right now, because I work so much on comic books and have to read so many of them for work, that I forget to read actual not having pictures books. So I just finished A Blade So Black by L.L. McKinney, which is a lot of fun. It's a big, fantasy or urban modern fantasy kind of story. I really enjoyed that. And I'm reading Dread Nation by Justina Ireland right now, which I'm about halfway through, and I'm really enjoying. It's a really good book.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about that one. Haven't picked it up myself. Might have to.
Yeah, they're both sort of, action and fantasy adventure stuff that's sort of tinged with horror, and they're both sort of for a YA audience, but very readable by everybody. And I'm really enjoying Dread Nation right now, and I really loved A Blade So Black, and I'm looking forward to reading the rest of that trilogy, because there's another one out and another one coming after that. So
Cool. So if you could share a meal with we'll go with three individuals, living or dead, who would they be? And I'm also curious, what would your meal choice be?
That's a tough one, because I feel like at this point, if I was sharing this sort of epic meal, I feel like I'd want to cook for these people. So I'd really like, I love to make a good gumbo. So that would be, I think that would be my choice of food. Have to be careful with who I invite as far as what I put in there. Let's see, three people. I think I would I would like to eat with Eartha Kitt. I love Eartha Kitt. Every interview I've ever seen with her is endlessly entertaining. She seems like she would be a ball to be friends with. So I think she's got to be one of the picks in there. It's just me and Eartha Kitt now. No, I'm trying to think who else I would put in there. Keep coming up with fictional characters. That's no good. Let's see. You've got me stumped. You know, I would love to talk to Hayao Miyazaki. I think he's got so many interesting stories, and both stuff that's happened in real life and the stories he's told that I feel like just by being near him I'd learn something about storytelling. He's really incredible, and I think Miyazaki's movies tell stories in different ways than a lot of Western media, and in ways that like seem completely different than what I'm used to. But then as I'm watching them, it's like, oh, yeah, this is really great. I would have never thought to do this, but
Right.
It's really fantastic.
Yeah, I made the choice of introducing my 2-year-old at the time to My Neighbor Totoro. So I know I've seen that movie over 100 times at least. But at this point, I still can't say I've ever been sick of it. Every time she's like, I want to watch Totoro, I'm like, yeah, let's watch Totoro.
Yeah, my daughters love Totoro and Ponyo. They go back and forth on those. So yeah, that would definitely be up there. And my third choice, I think this might just be because I've been doing a podcast about horror movies for a year now. But I would love to. He's no longer around, but I'd love to talk to Wes Craven. He he did a lot of things to sort of invent the horror genre as it is now, and he is a person that I think is really interesting because the older he got, he didn't really settle into doing the same thing over and over. Late career Wes Craven is just full of weird stuff. Movies like Scream and like Cursed and like Wes Craven's New Nightmare and Red Eye, all of which are just like different takes on horror stuff, going a completely different direction than what he had been doing, than what he helped invent with Nightmare on Elm Street. So like he's a person that I'd love to talk to just to get in his head a little bit.
Yeah, those are some solid answers. Thank you.
Thanks.
So before we wrap up with one last question, I just want to thank you for taking the time to sit down with me today and talk to our viewers here at the Champaign Public Library.
I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, it's been a treat for sure. So one last question. Have you got any new projects or anything you want to really pitch to let people know about what you've got going on coming up?
Yeah, there's a lot going on. Obviously, the free comic book day release of School for Extra-terrestrial Girls has an intro to the series as well as the beginning of volume 2, so you can get caught up and check out what we're doing next, and also get an intro to the series. So if you haven't read volume 1, hopefully this will make you want to go out and check that out, because it is in stores and libraries now. So be sure to pick that up for free. The second volume should be out in the next couple of months sometime. On top of that, I've already written it, but we're finishing up the run on the My Little Pony comics. I've been writing season 10 for about 2 years now. But the last issue of that, which is number 102, comes out next month. So everything up to that is available right now, and then that'll be the cherry on the sundae. So be sure to check that out. Issue 100 was huge and a ton of fun. Definitely worth people finding and checking out. we're still working on volume 10 of Princeless. The first 9 are already out there for people to read. The same with Raven. And then it was recently announced by Fievel and Friends, which is part of Macmillan, that I'm doing a series called The Dog Knight with Brie Indigo, who's a fantastic illustrator. And it's all about a young non-binary character who gets chosen to be the champion of all dogs. So there's sort of a superhero in their own right. They're going through trials to prove themselves, but they are surrounded by this Pantheon, which is our group of superhero dogs that assist them in everything that they're doing and as they're proving themselves. So if the idea of dog superheroes appeals to you, if the idea of a tiny dog Batman is something that interests you, you should definitely keep your eye out for that. That should be probably coming out in 2022 sometime.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. So, well, thank you once again for sitting down and taking the time out of your day to chat with us. I really appreciate it. It's been great.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to do it.
Thanks. Well, have a good rest of your free comic book day.
Thank you. Happy Free Comic Book Day, everyone.